Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Megan Smith, and I serve as the program director for Living with Wolves. Thank you so much for joining us here today for this special webinar with Jim and Jamie Dutcher in honor of Wolf Awareness Week. We are really excited to have you all here. For those who are new to Living with Wolves, we are a nonprofit organization dedicated to engaging the public worldwide in education, outreach, and research to promote truth and understanding about wolves while encouraging coexistence and inspiring people to take action to protect them. We achieve this mission through several programs. Our primary pillar is education. Jim and Jamie connect with classrooms in person and through virtual presentations worldwide. Additionally, through our new museum here in Ketchum, Idaho, as you can see pictured here, we welcome thousands of visitors a year and host many interactive school field trips and adult tours. We also believe that research is really important for learning more about wolves and encouraging science-backed management practices. And currently, we are supporting exciting research in British Columbia and Yellowstone National Park. Through our work, we've also come to understand the impact that wolves and other predators can have on ranching operations, which is why supporting conflict mitigation is important to us. We currently support a range rider operation that provides human presence for livestock on public lands to ranchers free of charge in order to prevent conflicts with predators. And on top of that, we are working to influence wolf policy and management by engaging with state representatives and agency staff. And I want to take a moment to thank everyone who responded to our recent calls to actions in our newsletters, especially those who contacted your representatives in regards to the House Interior Appropriations Bill that includes a rider to delist wolves. Currently, that bill has not moved to the floor and is thought to be lacking sufficient support to pass. So thank you everyone who reached out in opposition to that bill. Now, just a few quick notes before we get started. This session is being recorded and will be shared on our YouTube channel afterwards. For the privacy and safety of this event, as attendees, you cannot share your video, use your microphone, or access the chat box. But at the end of Jim and Jamie's presentation, we will have time for a Q&A. So in order to submit questions, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And if you prefer your first name not to be shared with your question, please check that Send Anonymously button there when you're typing your question. But feel free to submit questions at any time throughout the presentation. And now, after spending 6 years living alongside the Sawtooth Pack, they were among the first to observe and document the intimate and up-close behavior of wolves from within the heart of a pack. Their groundbreaking films and books have shared these rare insights with the world, and their experiences ultimately led them to found Living with Wolves, where they continue to educate and advocate for the species today. I'm thrilled to introduce two remarkable filmmakers, authors, multi-primetime Emmy Award winners, and founders of Living with Wolves, Jim and Jamie Dutcher.
Thank you, Megan. That's really sweet. And thank you all so much for coming. We're just, we're really excited to do this webinar with everyone. It's our first and hopefully not our last. And as you can see, we're coming to you from our museum in Ketchum. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. Just give me a second to get the screen set up. Okay. In the beginning, we were known as Dutcher Film Productions. Jim on camera and me recording sound, documenting events that hadn't occurred here for the past 50 years. We called them the Sawtooth Pack after the majestic Sawtooth Mountains that rose behind their riparian home on the edge of Idaho wilderness. For 6 years, they allowed us to share their lives, and we came to know them both as individuals and as integral parts of their pack. We were passive observers in their lives and honored to have their trust. The Sawtooth wolves weren't exactly wild, but then again, they couldn't have been. At the time, there were virtually no wild wolves in Idaho, or for that matter, throughout the American West. We knew, however, that plans were underway to reintroduce gray wolves to a portion of their former range, and it seemed the right time to produce a film about them. Our goal was to document the intimate lives and relationships within a pack. In 3 primetime television documentaries, the Sawtooth Pack helped reintroduce people to wolves, just as their wild cousins were being reintroduced onto American soil. In 1995, the US government captured 66 wolves in Canada and released them into Yellowstone National Park and central Idaho. As the wolves returned to the Rocky Mountains progressed on schedule, knowledge and understanding of them lagged far behind. Public perception was still based on centuries-old mythology than on any real observation. For some, wolves were demons to be feared and hated, vermin whose eradication had been justified. To others, they were the spiritual embodiment of America's lost connection with nature, a pure and flawless creature, more symbol than substance. But for us living with them, it didn't take long to become captivated by them for altogether different reasons. The more we observed, filmed, and recorded their sounds, the less we saw the mythical beasts of our dreams and nightmares. What we did find instead was something a lot more familiar. They were actually a lot like us.
We called it Wolf Camp, a deceptively simple name for a collection of tents, platform, and fencing that we had constructed. Wolf Camp was a forever evolving project, and our resources were decidedly limited. Heat came from a wood stove, shower water from a nearby creek or melted snow, and light and cooking flame came from candles, oil, and propane. Wolf Camp was more than a place. It was the embodiment of all inspiration, trial and error, and years of hard work. It was the foundation of an entirely new way we were telling the world about wolves. The project grew out of an idea: find a way to share the hidden life of an animal that was so scarce and elusive it had become virtually unknown. The project was to span a few years and finish in a documentary film. However, it evolved into something far bigger than we could ever imagine.
By 12 weeks, the pups at the Dutcher Wolf Camp displayed distinct personalities. One named Lakota is very shy, while his look-alike brother, Kamats, is the most alert and curious of the litter. It seems to Jim that little Kamats has the confidence and spirit of a natural leader. Another winter descends, imposing bitter cold. The deep snow is an obstacle to filmmakers, but a big white playground to wolves wearing thick new coats. Though Kamats the alpha appears to play aggressively, when he inadvertently knocks a yearling over, he returns as if to apologize. To Jim, it seems that the confidence Kamats possessed in youth is blossoming into a calm benevolence. He is more alert than the others, with a look that seems to convey the intelligence and concern of a leader.
During our years of living with the Sawtooth Pack, we feel that our most significant observations were the demonstrations of care that this pack showed for one another. An example of this behavior revealed itself In the very first year of the project with a dark female omega wolf that we had named Mataki. Mataki is the word for shadow in the Blackfoot language, and like all omega wolves, she was the focus of pack aggression, forced to eat last and often picked upon. As a result of her omega status, Mataki would often go off and be alone in a remote area of the territory, and it was during a time like this that a mountain lion climbed over the fence and killed Mataki. Now, the story I'd like to share with you is not how Mataki died, but rather how the pack reacted to her death. For the remainder of that spring and well into the following summer, their behavior changed and they appeared depressed. Hanging their heads, they drifted about their home in a listless manner. Now, normally, omega wolves, Jamie and I have noticed, instigate play in an effort to diffuse pack tension. Mataki was good at this, and when she died, the other wolves lost the spirit to play. Another indication of their changed behavior was the way they howled. Howling is an exciting time for wolves. They rally together to celebrate the solidarity of their family. Singing together as a group, the howl is punctuated with lively yips and whines. After Mataki died, their howling changed for a time. No longer gathering together, they would howl separately and with very little energy. Their vocalizations had a mournful, searching quality to them, as if they were trying to call Mataki back. These changed behaviors went on for about 6 weeks.
We recognize the face, a broad mask that tapers gracefully into a long muzzle. We've looked into the eyes, bright with curiosity. We understand the messages conveyed through posture, the alertness seen in expression, the playfulness of a bow, the confidence or fear betrayed by an animated tail. We can be forgiven for thinking we already know the wolf, for in many ways, we already do. It's now understood that all domestic dogs are the descendants of wolves, and there's evidence that domestication likely began more than 20,000 years ago and possibly over 30,000 years ago. Yet whenever domestication occurred, our special relationship with wolves certainly began much earlier. It's believed that early humans and wolves lived in close proximity. Humans were and still are, humans and wolves still are, two of the most geographically widespread mammals on Earth. As our ancestors were spreading across the globe, wolves were there, two of the few animals to live in extended family groups where cooperation is essential, and it's not surprising that we became kindred spirits. In the lives of wolves, we see reflections of things that we have come to value in ourselves. They care for pups with a familiar devotion and share our reflective instinct to care for youngsters, related or not. They hold a place in society for their elders. They push boundaries and explore, then return home to visit their families. They care what happens to one another. They miss each other when they're separated, and they grieve when one among them dies. They do all of this with a clarity of purpose that we often struggle to achieve. The traits that wolves passed along to dogs served us well as we became shepherds and farmers. We capitalized on the wolf's territorialism to create a dog that steadfastly guarded our flocks and property. We put the wolf's superior sense of smell and knack for locating prey to use as trackers and retrievers on our own hunts. We transformed the wolf's skill at maneuvering big grazing animals into a herding instinct, helping us move our livestock from place to place. The wolf also passed along to dogs its most indispensable qualities: devotion to its pack, sociability, and a capacity for learning, communication, and expression. In turning the wolf into the dog, we created the ultimate companion, a faithful friend that can understand our intentions, perhaps even better than our fellow humans can. Both wolves and humans, brought unique complementary talents to a relationship that was based on mutual respect. Several scholars agree humans more than likely learned to hunt from wolves. The relationship between dogs and humans has been so mutually beneficial and enduring that it's clear that we influence each other's evolution. Knowing all that the wolf bequeathed to our beloved dogs, how strange it is that we often reserve for wolves a hatred that we hold for no other animal. We brought our domestic dogs along with us into our pastures, cities, and homes. Wolves are the dogs that stayed behind, favoring their wild ways. And perhaps it's that we can't forgive them for. The calm center of the Sawtooth Pack was a benevolent alpha male we called Kamats. That's a Blackfoot word meaning freedom in the Blackfoot language. He was a strong and confident wolf, but was not above playing with his packmates or indulging in boundless energy and curiosity. His mate was a high-strung, dark female we named Shamook. On the opposite end of the pack was Kamats's littermate, a big gray male we called Lakota. And despite his size, Lakota was timid and shy. And for many years, he was subjected to the unenviable position of Omega, the lowest member of the pack, often enduring aggression and picked upon by the others. 5 other wolves, 4 males and 1 female, made up the pack's middle ranks. In 1996, Shamook gave birth to 3 pups, totaling 11 wolves.
The myth of the darker side of wolves has often appeared in folklore, fable, and unfortunately in modern literature and films. Misunderstanding breeds fear, and fear can breed hatred. The truth is, wolves are afraid of people, and they try to avoid them. Along with all wild animals, such as moose, cougars, bears, wolves could be dangerous, but these events are exceedingly rare. For example, in the past 120 years, there have been only 2 possible cases where a wolf attacked and killed a human being in North America. To put this in perspective, over the past 12 years, bears have killed over 40 people, and cougars have killed more than 11 since 1990. Wolves are not a serious threat to humans.
Wolves can be described in many ways, but above all, they're social. They need each other. As hunters, as parents, as keepers of a home territory, wolves succeed as part of a group. They've evolved to live and function within a society. They communicate, they cooperate, they teach their young, and they share the duties of day-to-day life. In our years observing and filming the Sawtooth Pack, we have come to see wolves as deeply emotional individuals who care about what happens to themselves and their family members. Like many other animals, they are emotionally intelligent beings. A wolf knows who he is, and he sees his packmates as individuals. He has a concept of how his actions are perceived by others. He is capable of empathy, compassion, encouragement, and apology. As humans, we're empathetic creatures too. So many times watching the Sawtooth Pack, we were struck by the realization that we weren't just sharing the wolves' experiences, we were sharing their feelings. Our joy over the first snowfall of the season was mirrored in the way they raced about playing tag and rolling in the fresh powder. When Shamook gave birth to pups in a den that she had dug under a fallen tree, we were over the moon. We couldn't wait to see them and make sure that they were healthy and okay. As we watched the pack gather around the den entrance, pacing and whining back and forth in excitement, we could see that they had the same feelings we did. When a member of the pack was killed by a mountain lion, the change in their behavior was undeniable, and we felt their grief.
Some winters are cold, but some are brutal. The Dutchers are consumed by daily chores and by life with the wolves. Half a decade will pass as a blur of seasons. Winter cold seems to melt suddenly into summer heat. Summer is quickly winter again. But there is music accompanying the passage of time, an ancient music of the wild. Sound recordist for the films, Jamie spends her spare time accumulating an archive of the pack's howls. She finds that she can identify individual wolves by their unique inflections.
Surprisingly, Lakota had the most beautiful howl. Eyes shut and head thrown back, he would just pour his heart out, rich, mournful, lonely, and sad. I felt as if I were listening to him sing the blues, giving voice to the despair of an Omega.
Jamie believes that wolves are so intelligent that they can communicate in complicated ways through their howls and body postures, ways we don't yet understand.
Each was an individual in personality and voice, but needed to feel forever linked with his companions in the pack. They constantly rubbed and licked one another as if to reassure themselves of this closeness. Even competitive wrestling was a way of reinforcing that each had a place in the pack structure, that they were a united family.
It is at last clear to Jim and Jamie that the project is succeeding. The pack is now a cohesive family. Most importantly, the wolves trust their human friends.
We had names for each, but they didn't know that. We didn't approach the pack. The wolves came to us only if they chose to. It made their friendship all the more rewarding. Kamatz was in charge, but he could be just as playful as the others. I'd come to admire him immensely after years of watching him lead. To be accepted by him, to be worthy of his attention and maybe even affection, was an overwhelming honor.
Early on, the Dutchers learn that the wolves rarely sleep through the night. To capture the full range of pack vocalizations, Jamie sets up an outside microphone wired to sound gear in her bed. Even when howling breaks out in the middle of the night, she's ready to record. Wolves howl at any time, day or night, sometimes in response to a distant sound, sometimes to check on one another. Jamie believes wolves howl for more reasons than we can know. Often the whole pack rallies together and starts a game of tag, playing in the dark, unmindful of the bone-chilling cold.
Their nightly singing became as soothing as rainfall on a window, an ancient sound of the earth, of life itself. The singing would end, and the pack would settle down, leaving the world silent again. I would fall asleep, wanting this magical life to go on forever.
Wolves are not only social animals living together as families, they are also a keystone species in that they help manage and bring stability to ecosystems. In the 1920s, wolves were nearly eradicated from the American West, and then realizing that the wolf was nearly extinct in this area and that ecosystems were falling out of balance, the U.S. government captured wolves in Canada and reintroduced them to Yellowstone National Park in central Idaho in the 1990s. Since reintroduction, there have been many improvements to ecosystems reported by various scientific studies. We have learned a lot from the return of the wolf. For example, while the wolves were absent for those 70 years or so, elk, their primary source of food, would just linger in the riparian areas, browsing on and suppressing the new growth of willow, aspen, and cottonwood trees. Today, the fear of wolves has redistributed the elk. They are now much more alert and prefer higher ground and other places where they feel safe from wolves. Meanwhile, back along the rivers and streams, the vegetation has bounced back. Until recently, because the elk would eat all the young saplings, the only cottonwood trees in the entire park were no younger than 70 years of age. Trees now stabilize the banks of streams and provide shade, which lowers the water temperature, making the habitat better for trout, resulting in more and bigger fish. The remains of a kill left behind by wolves provides critically needed nourishment for other animals, scavengers such as grizzly bears, wolverines, black bears, golden and bald eagles, just to name a very few. In Yellowstone, the overpopulation of coyotes has now fallen. The wolves either killed them or chased them away. This has increased the number of rodents, rabbits, hares, pocket gophers, field mice, animals that provide food for struggling birds of prey. Owls, hawks, and eagles are now doing much better. The drop in the coyote population because of the wolves has also benefited pronghorn antelope. You see, coyotes specialize in feeding on young, newborn antelope fawns and their mothers as they try to protect their offspring. Wolves do not. They go after the larger, slow-moving elk. Along with all these environmental improvements, having wolves back in the park draws 150,000 visitors a year, people that come to Yellowstone just to see wolves. That's an extra $89 million added annually to the local economy.
As we began our wolf project, we had the opportunity to spend time in Denali National Park, Alaska, with wolf biologist Dr. Gordon Haber. At the time, Gordon was conducting the longest continuous study of wolves that had begun in 1939 by Adolph Murray. When Gordon died in a backcountry plane accident in 2009, we lost a meticulous scientist and an outspoken wolf advocate. Gordon was one of the first to write about the devotion that wolves have for one another. He had observed courting wolves snuggling while walking and lying together. He also noted that wolf pairs maintained this physical closeness outside of the mating season. Gordon's most moving observation of the devotion between a pair of wolves came at the moment when that bond was shattered. The male and female were the alphas of Denali's Sawtooth Pack. They paired in 2002 and together endured the loss of their first pups to a marauding bear. But by the end of 2004, they had successfully raised 2 litters. Most of the Sawtooth's territory fell within the huge protected area of Denali, but some of their territory fell outside of the park boundaries. The hatred of wolves burns deep in many parts of Alaska, and some of the most anti-wolf hunters run legal trap lines just outside the irregular border of the park. Wolves, unable to detect whether they're inside or outside the park, run the gauntlet of death the moment they cross the invisible boundary. It was a month before breeding season when one of these leg hold traps, just outside of Denali, ensnared the young alpha female. Now, leg hold traps don't kill outright. They hold the wolf in place to starve. If the wolf's lucky, the trapper will appear within a few days and finish the job. The Sawtooth female languished in the trap for 2 weeks before she was finally shot. During her entire ordeal, her mate stayed by her side, and it's quite possible he brought food to her. Desperate to help, but in the end, unable to keep her alive. When at last she was killed, he and the yearlings ran back into the park. The loyalty he displayed during that ordeal would have taught us enough, but his behavior over the next several weeks would prove even more heartbreaking. When he and his offspring left the trap site, they returned to the den where the pups had been born. There, the male dug through the snow and cleared out the den, removing leaves and loose soil, preparing it for a new litter of pups that he would never father. The next day, he traveled 14 miles back to the spot where his mate had been trapped, moving at such a fast pace that his pack often struggled to keep up with him. Gordon had written that he searched for her with such intensity that it was almost obsessive. He probably didn't see his mate die. When the trapper appeared, fear likely overwhelmed his senses, and he fled into the forest. Perhaps he heard the gunshot and understood what it meant, but perhaps not. Most likely, all he really understood was that his mate was in trouble, and then she was gone. Did he prepare the den and search for her, believing she was still alive? Or did he do these things because he was so upset to the point of madness, unable to accept what he knew? When you look at wolves as only vermin or identification numbers, nothing can explain his behavior. Only through the lens of our own human understanding does it become clear. Powerless to help as she died, what else would he have been feeling? The Sawtooth pair was as closely bonded as any human couple. When he lost her, his grief was equally pure and terribly sharp. When Gordon left him, he was standing on a high plateau, howling over and over in the direction of the trap site.
We will never know for sure how the Sawtooth Pack looked upon us. Were we members of the pack or just familiar friends? We hope they would become ambassadors for their kind to help people understand their ways, to speak for past wolves that had been feared and persecuted, and new wolves that are taking their first steps into an uncertain future. The Sawtooth Pack rose to this challenge with more grace than we could ever expected. We gave them our pledge to respect their space and honor their message. In return, they gave us their trust. We will never forget that gift. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim and Jamie, for sharing those incredible stories and valuable perspectives. I know this information helps people see wolves in a new light. So, we have already had some people express their appreciation for your work and this presentation in the Q&A, and now we're going to take questions. Again, anyone out there, please feel free to add your questions into the Q&A box and check send privately if you wouldn't like your first name shared. But we are going to begin. I have a question from Brianna. She asked, how did the pack know that Motaki had died? And then I want to include this one next with Steve were the other wolves allowed to see Motaki when she passed?
Okay, well, good question. Well, the wolves did see Motaki die from the evidence that was left behind at the scene. There were tufts of her fur up in a tree where the mountain lion had dragged her up, and claw marks on the base of the tree, on the trunk, where and wolf claw marks where the wolves were trying to get to her and get to the cat. So they did, they were there, and the cat probably took the opportunity of just moving through the territory, and Motaki was by herself, and the cat killed her, and the pack probably then heard the commotion and came running, and so they did see her, and they did know she had died.
Yeah, we had seen the fur up in the tree, and there were needle sharp claw marks way up in the tree, and Mataki's neck was broken, which is typical of a cougar kill, and the body was eviscerated, which also is the same for cougars.
But yeah, cougars will do.
Go ahead.
Good question.
All right. Next question is from Samuel. Why did you have to have this project in captivity? Was the behavior real?
Oh, good question. Good question, Samuel. It's important to know that all behavior studies done on wolves have been done in captivity. And this is mostly because you can't social studies, because you can't observe their social behavior, their real social behavior, with radio telemetry or from so far away. And if we had been fortunate enough to come upon a pack of wolves and habituate them to our camera gear, the next time somebody pointed something at them, it might not be a camera. So that's why it had to be done in captivity. And where most behavior studies have been done in situations of 1 to 3 acres, we had and still have, I think it's still the largest wolf enclosure in the world. It was 25 acres where they could live out their lives and be wolves. And we found that actually a lot of the behavior that we observed later on, biologists were seeing the same behavior in Yellowstone National Park, and we would actually get phone calls saying, "Hey, did you see something like this?" Or "I saw this, I don't quite know what it was." And we would tell them, it's like, "Oh yeah, we saw that, and this is what it was."
Yeah, we asked Gordon because we were concerned seeing so much play. Would wolves in the wild who have to worry about being hunted and making a living as they did, would they play also? And Gordon said, if anyone watches a pack of wolves and 30 minutes go by and there isn't any play, that's a very unusual 30 minutes.
Yeah. Oh, one cool thing that we had observed that they later on saw in Yellowstone, um, a biologist they were seeing these depressions in the snow, and it was filled with like deer hide or fur and leaves, and they just couldn't quite figure out what they were. Well, the Sawtooth Pack did the same thing. In the winter, they would make these depressions in the snow, sort of like how a dog goes around in circles to lay down, and they would fill it with like little bits of stick and leaves and fur just to kind of raise them a little bit over the ground to sleep on. So they were pretty stoked to find out about that.
Awesome. Another question is the Sawtooth Pack still in existence today?
No, they've died out. The life of a wolf is not very long, 7 years in Yellowstone. Um, we at the end of the project, we moved the pack to the Nez Perce Reservation, where they lived out their lives. And one of them, I think, lived to be about 14 years old, but he's gone now too.
Yeah. And it was because the wolves were being moved to a similar situation. It was decided with the tribe that we would do tubal ligations on the females so they wouldn't continue breeding, and since it was a finite space. And it was our hope that when there was no more Sawtooth Pack, there wouldn't be a need for captive wolves and people would have a better understanding. But we're still working away, unfortunately. So, yeah.
Jordana asked, what initially made you interested in studying wolves?
What initially made us interested in studying wolves?
Well, before wolves, I did a film on mountain lions and beavers. I always seem to pick subjects of animal subjects that are really rare to see, and they're nocturnal or they're just afraid, like a mountain lion. And so Dr. Hornacher, who I worked with the mountain lion film, said, "There's no way you're going to be able to film a mountain lion in the wild in Idaho." He admitted that he had only seen one himself, that when he hadn't used his tracking dogs. So we felt that that project went really well, and we wanted to making the film part of the film. And so, to be completely honest and transparent, putting up the enclosure was always part of our films. And I think the audiences seem to appreciate the honesty of that. And so,
Yeah. And
yeah.
then just after cougar, it's just, wolves seemed like a natural progression because they were so terribly misunderstood and vilified that we knew there was another side to the wolf.
Yeah. Speaking of wolves getting vilified, Samantha's asked, don't wolves kill a lot of livestock?
Hmm. Good question. Misconception.
No, they don't kill a lot of, it's a very small percentage of cattle and sheep that get killed by wolves. There's a lot of other things that livestock has to tend to, birthing problems, weather. Just, I think predation by wolves is like less than 1%. But we understand the heartbreak that must be for ranchers. And so that's one of the reasons we do what we do with our range rider program, and train people how to have a presence for the over their herds so that the wolves don't take any of the livestock.
Yeah, and it not only helps with wolves, but it helps with all predators. And it's just, ranchers going back to methods that they used 100 years ago when they were ranching with predators.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. In that same vein, from Tom, I hear that wolves have decimated the deer and elk that hunters like to hunt.
No, elk populations are stronger than ever. Yeah.
yeah, they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Part of the misconception with that is that hunters for a long time without hunting with wolves used to go to the same spot every year. They would get their elk, and it wasn't very difficult. Wolves are really the only predators that were made to keep elk moving. And so they're not an ambush predator like a cougar or even a bear can be. So they keep the elk moving. So where there might have been elk for, decades in one meadow and have had no reason to leave, now they've left that meadow and they've moved to another meadow. But deer, elk, wolves and their prey have lived together for millennia. So they don't decimate their populations. They keep everything in balance.
Here's a question from Kate. Did you ever get a chance to observe the pack's hunting behavior? I know they were brought in roadkill during the project, but did they ever have kills of their own?
Good question. Because they were in an enclosure, even for as large as it was, it wouldn't have been ethical for us to release ungulates into the enclosure for them to hunt. It just wouldn't have been right. But we did observe them hunting small game in the enclosure, rabbits, squirrels, occasionally birds.
Fox.
They would go after fox. They weren't good at catching fox though. But yeah, so not really the big game, but small animals we did see them go after.
Yeah, but our study wasn't about that. It was about the social behavior of the wolves.
Yeah, we all know that they travel long distances and how they brought down their prey, and we really wanted to get into the unknown social life of wolves.
Here's a question from Brenda. What happened to Lakota? Was he always the Omega?
No, when we went back to Winchester, where the pack had moved to, he had been able to lead that Omega position, and Mahat's one of the younger males, and we had a female Omega too, Wyakin, so they became the Omegas. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was interesting because even though they sort of retired Lakota, and it would have been Lakota's right to start picking on the new Omegas, he never did. It's like he knew.
Yeah.
It's like I get it. So yeah.
Here's a question from Mary Jean. Would you do anything differently if you could go back in time and live with the wolves again?
Hmm.
I don't think so.
Well, I can think of one thing.
What's that?
From the beginning, we knew the project had to come to an end, and we were on Forest Service land and we had permits and they were finite. And I think that if there were a way ahead of time to have somehow secured to have stayed with them,
Yeah.
to not have to move them, to have had that land throughout their lifetime. I think that's one thing we would have done different. I think that it broke our hearts.
Yeah.
And
years after we moved the Sawtooth Pack, wolves did come into that valley, and we found scat and tracks of the wolves at wolf camp, and there was a pack that got eliminated by the federal government with the use of tracking devices on one wolf and fixed wing aircraft and helicopter, and they killed all the wolves. And my son and a friend went out and recovered the carcass of the alpha female. You could see where the helicopter landed, and they left the carcass and just took the radio color. So we took the carcass and we were going to tan it, but the Fish and Game Department said, no, this is state property, and they took it away from us.
Yeah, we
It
wanted
didn't seem, it was
to
just
show
left there.
everybody what they'd done, but
But it was really sad to see the wolves come back to that place. Yeah.
We have another question. Aren't the wolves that were reintroduced from Canada a different species than what was once here?
No, this is the same species, and that's just something that's been said to discredit the
The reintroduction.
reintroduction, the success of reintroduction.
Yeah, they're the wolves in Canada are the same species, and they cross the borders all the time. So
Yeah.
they're the same wolves.
Yeah.
Here's a question from Karen. Are you seeing a change in the younger generations, even among populations of people traditionally hostile to wolves, considering hatred of wolves is probably a learned behavior?
Oh yeah. Yes. Definitely, since we've started this project and through our films and our books and our nonprofit work and our educational outreach, um, there's really been a huge change. We do speaking engagements all over the country, all over the world, and you know, uh, hunters would come up to us and say, "Hey, I always wanted to kill a wolf and I can't do it now. I didn't know they were family animals." And it's just, introducing people to what wolves really are about. And I think that their children get it. And that's a lot of pressure from the kids. And actually, Megan does a lot of our educational outreach now, and she probably sees a lot of it. I know she sees a lot of it
I
as
remember
well.
one time we were talking in Midland, Texas, and the rancher came into the presentation and he said, "Ah, my wife forced me to come here, but I'll stay around." And at the end, he was in tears.
Yeah.
Another hunter wrote to us and said, "I'd always been afraid of wolves, and your film showed me something very different from what I thought it was true." And with your permission, I want to name my hunting dogs after the Sawtooth Pack. So we
Oh.
get letters like that and phone calls all the time.
And kids that we've spoken to, you know, 20 years ago, 15, 20 years
Yeah.
ago, and they've circled back and they're like, "Hey, I went to one of your presentations, or you talked to me on the phone, and I'm graduating with a degree in outdoor sciences or biology, and it's all because of you, and I just want to say thank you." And that really,
Yeah.
it really, hits you, and you're making a difference. And
Yeah.
it's just a little slower than we'd like it to be, but it's happening. It's happening.
I'd like to highlight one comment we got in the chat from Kelly, who said she wants to thank you both for having a phone call with her in the early 2000s, that
Ah,
your insight helped her give two different speeches at college on wolf conservation. So, prime
oh
example
my
of
gosh.
that right there. Love that.
Thank you, Kelly. Wow.
Wow. Somebody totally knew.
That's great.
Yeah.
Uh, Clarifying question from Karen. What states are wolves living in now, and are many still being hunted?
Mm.
Well, they want to keep the population about 500, and every year it goes by that they don't eliminate more wolves is a year of failure. There are about 1,300 wolves probably in Idaho, and it goes on and on. There's a part of the Fish and Game Department that regulates all that.
Yeah, and
It,
currently,
yeah, it's also sad to hear, and when you look at the numbers and everything, that little pups are being pulled out of dens and stomped to death, and yeah,
it's pretty horrific. But
yeah,
Oregon, Washington, California, um, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, Mexican wolves in New Mexico, uh, the Great Lakes, and red wolves in the Carolinas, a few red wolves. Um, so they're, if they're given a chance, they can get a good foothold and take care of their own numbers.
The trouble is when you hunt wolves, it's usually the alphas that stand up to the perceived danger. And when you kill the alphas, you kill the knowledge of the pack. And it makes it more difficult for the wolves, the younger wolves, or to bring down prey and work together as a team. They've lost that knowledge. So when that happens, they go after livestock because it's easier.
A question from Sage. There's a difference in opinion on using the terms alpha and omega versus breeding pairs. Can you guys give your opinion?
Okay. The alphas, okay, are the breeding pairs. Okay, that's what they are. They're the parents, I guess you'd say, of the family. And alpha is just a term that was used. Alpha certainly doesn't mean aggressive or dangerous or, super macho. They are the parents and have always been the parents. Omega is just is a, using the Greek alphabet, is just a way to describe the wolf that's at the lower rung of the pack. And sort of similar, kids on a playground, you've always got the kids that are, kind of popular, and they're the top, and then you get the kids that are not popular and sometimes picked on, and they're the ones on the bottom. So those are just, terms to describe where they are in their family order.
Some biologists want to use different terms, but not all of them. I've heard wolf biologists tell me that we shouldn't lose those names. It's the way we communicate, and calling it a wolf and alpha. If you describe the wolf as also being a breeding pair, I don't think there's any wrong in that.
Well, I want to end with one last question from Fiona, and this is one for both of you. What is the most incredible or special moment that you shared with the wolves?
Hmm.
Oh boy. So,
Um, for me, can I have two?
Yes.
Probably two. The most obvious is when Shamook gave birth to the pups, it was decided that I would go into the den and check on them. And you just don't know, even though I knew her since she was a pup, you just don't know how she's going to react. And I walked up to the den and I sat outside of the den site and kind of quietly talked to her, and she came out, and I had my little flashlight and I'm showing it to her. And, I just, she moved to the side and I took it as a signal to go in, and I crawled my way 6 feet through this little tiny tunnel, and saw the wolf pups there, and just checked them out real quick, got a count, and squeezed my way back out, and she was still sitting there and just gave me a lick on the nose and went back in, which was pretty heartfelt. That was pretty amazing. And and then also just a simpler, when Lakota would get picked on, he'd often go off by himself and just hang out. And sometimes I would just be in the woods or whatever, just sitting there, and he would just come by and he would lay down and just to be with someone, and we'd just hang out. And it was just special. We never tried to call him over or anything. He'd just kind of sit just to be with another warm body.
yeah.
Yeah.
For me, there came a time in the project when there was a lot of opposition. Um, Politicians were calling it wolf propaganda, and we needed to be shut down. And came a moment that my confidence sort of, fell a bit, and I decided to take a hike without my cameras and without my crew, just into their territory, and Kamatz followed me, and I went up into the trees and sat down on a log, and Kamatz came over and sat right in front of me. And then I have a way of talking to myself when I'm trying to sort out problems. And he would tilt his head and listen to me. And finally, he took his paw and he put it up in front of me. And I put my hand to it. And we just sort of sat there like that, hand and paw. And that was very meaningful. Yeah, but there were so many moments with the Sawtooth Pack, memories that, it was almost 30 years ago, and they live with us constantly.
Yeah, I recommend anybody who hasn't read their books, please do. You get so many more special stories like that that are shared in there. But sadly, we have reached the end of our time today. Thank you so much, Jim and Jamie, for this inspiring and insightful presentation, conversation, and most of all, thank you to everyone who joined us. I hope today's discussion inspires you to speak up for wolves. They can't defend themselves from misunderstanding and persecution, but together we can. So thank you for being a part of the ongoing effort towards coexistence. If you'd like to learn more about our work or support our initiatives, please visit our website at livingwithwolves.org. You can follow us on social media and sign up for our monthly email newsletters for updates and action opportunities. If you have additional questions or ones that weren't answered today, we had a lot in the chat box. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of them. Please feel free to reach out to us at info@livingwithwolves.org, and you can find that email on our website as well. And for anyone who is in the Ketchum area or planning a visit, please come see our beautiful museum. We have a lot of amazing photography, clips from the Dutchers Award-winning films, traps and research collars on display, and a lot of fascinating information about wolves. So with that, thank you again, everyone, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Yeah, thank you all so much for coming. Thank you.